leading up to the raid, what do you know what like the local sentiment was about the Branch Davidians? You know, like because they're portrayed as crazy people. I don't believe they were. I mean, Koresh was doing things I think were crazy, but I don't think they were as like deranged as the media was portraying them. Is that like what's your
Right.
takeaway?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The local police chief himself was, consistently defending them in every way. You had locals who were claiming that, the representation they were receiving in the media spotlight was completely inverted in
Mm-hmm.
terms of how they conducted themselves throughout the community. They were very much in good standing, high standing in the community itself. The locals in no way, just, occasional kind of like in a Randy Weaver sort of way where you might have issues with, let's say, a neighbor who has an issue with property rights of some kind, which definitely played a role in Randy Weaver's situation because that man was legitimately insane and wrote a bunch of letters claiming that Randy Weaver was going to assassinate the Pope and the president and all this crazy stuff. So it inevitably kind of led to a lot of the pretext that the feds utilized to kind of like stage the raid in the first place. But it was similar in the way that David Koresh was essentially kind of, as far as like allegedly prioritized and targeted, was due to the fact that there was like automatic gunfire that was heard on the property,
Right.
right, from some neighbor who then reported it, and then there is allegedly uh, you know, obviously the raid itself was February 28th, 93. But yeah, honestly, it's like what really happened to kind of stage this was that the search warrant, how it was obtained, was because of this suspicion of the Branch Davidians modifying their weapons to have this automatic fire capability. And so that all came and stemmed from this claim that Koresh had purchased these kits with M16 lower receiver parts,
Mm.
which I do think is important because again, it's clearly just a kind of a tax loophole in a way that the state and feds violate, and infringe upon your inherent rights. And so this alone is a kind of an infringement upon the Second Amendment itself. And so the ATF allegations being that David could have been, so this was later on even acknowledged as not being you know, um, any sort of as far as like the status quo legitimized process of how you would go through conducting
Right.
some sort of search warrant, or obtaining some sort of search warrant. You can't obtain a search warrant on allegations that David could have been combining M16 trigger components with a modified AR-15 lower receiver, which is apparently, according to ATF regulations, allegedly constructive possession of an unregistered machine gun without paying the $200 tax for legality. So it's exactly what they did to it really is effectively the same playbook they used on Randy Weaver 6 months earlier when they had a federal informant who was an operative himself and legitimately not only an asset, was an actual agent who was essentially sewing himself into the inner circle of Randy Weaver over time, and then finally he convinces him to sell him a sawed-off shotgun. I believe it was two sawed-off shotguns, and so he goes to actually cut the barrel of the gun, and he begins to cut it at the legal limit.
Mm.
And I think it was an eighth of an inch or something that the Fed said, actually, no, cut it up,
Ridiculous.
put it right here.
That's
And Randy
ridiculous.
fucking did it for his buddy.
Right. Right.
And it's just like the
They're
craziest
just
thing
looking for any.
ever.
They're looking for any way to get you. If they don't have the thing they need, they will make it happen, and that happens throughout history. Before we get to like the fire, the raid, all that stuff, I do think it's important. I don't know how many people who listen know like all about Waco because it's like one of those words that you just know like it's a bad something bad happened there, but I feel like a lot of it's just become watered down. And like, can you tell us who were the Branch Davidians, and then we'll get into Koresh because he's pretty fascinating, dude.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and keep in mind, as I said, Branch Davidians very much considered to be cordial with everyone in the surrounding community and seemingly in very high regard, but they were living a very unorthodox way of life. I mean, that is obviously
Hmm.
undeniable, but it was originally a splinter group from the Seventh Day Adventists and had come to believe that essentially David Koresh was effectively the Lamb, meaning that he would precede the second coming of Jesus Christ as told in the book of Revelation.
Hmm.
And so in addition to him being the group's spiritual leader, he also assumed the burden of sex for the male Davidians. So this is where you get a lot of the, controversy, and
The burden
especially
of sex.
because
So no one else can have sex but Koresh,
yeah,
right?
yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, it's he
Crazy.
was allowed only he was allowed to sleep with the female members, and it didn't stop there either. He also took multiple wives, so he's practicing polygamy, and one even as young as 14 years old
Yeah, it's
allegedly.
crazy.
And yeah, and so um, now, at the time, and I hate making this argument, it's not any sort of defense for the immoral aspect of what's playing out here, but to understand the legality of the the contextual understanding of kind of how this played out in a legal way. Um, Obviously, technically, under Texas law at this time, it was actually legal,
Yeah,
right?
14 was like the age of consent in Texas.
Exactly.
Is it still that? Do you know if it's still that age right now?
I'm not sure.
I
That would
hope
be
not.
I'd be
honestly
concerned
worth
if you knew that
looking into.
offhand.
Yeah, I know, right? But no, I know that I always trace a lot of these. I trace a lot of these elite pedophile networks back
Yeah.
to essentially they flee to the Netherlands, which have very
Yep.
Oh wow.
young age of consent laws.
Oh wow.
17
And
now.
Even when it is illegal, it's a slap on the wrist.
Wow.
exactly,
That's
and
crazy.
essentially even at like 16 or below, it's up to the parent or specifically the guardian themselves to report the abuse. It's like some strange
Wow.
pedophile loophole that's playing out internationally. That's
Real quick, I
providing
did want to
sort
make a mention. I do feel like you brought the legal, but even that aside, even if it is illegal, it does no one any benefit to kill the victim. So bear that in mind.
Oh
Right.
So
no,
it's
yeah,
like,
no.
Right.
like cool, you killed the supposed oppressor, but you also killed the victim. So
Yeah,
it doesn't
like
do anybody any good
it's
here.
totally disgusting. I
Yeah.
don't care if Texas thinks that's legal or not, or did think it was legal. It's disgusting. And then on the other hand, like you shouldn't be killing all these people
Yeah.
to get at the one person who has major disgusting flaws. So okay, he's a polygamist, which that's not in the Bible. So and he's the only person hooking up with everyone. Is he hooking up with like other guys' wives in the cult?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
And
100%. Yeah, and
what
there
they're cool
was
with that?
David Tip. No, like there were certain individuals definitely struggled and grappled with this far more than others. But yeah, it was strange because he must have had the most silver tongue, because or something else was playing out psychologically as
Right.
far as some sort of manipulation technique playing out, because um, it's very strange how he was able to convince these husbands that were, of high stature in society, very wealthy and prominent defense attorneys. I mean, Harvard graduates of all walks of life, African Americans,
Right.
were a part of the group, which I think is a very strange dynamic, considering just like kind of just the perspective on the Branch Davidians alone. I think it's kind
Right.
of important to spotlight that as being a realistic aspect
Equal
of the
opportunity
Davidians. And
and diverse down in Mount Carmel.
yeah, yeah, right. Very strange. Which, by the way, I do find it very interesting, and I won't get too much into the kind of like the woo-woo spiritual nature of things, but it does almost always boil down to some strange symbolic aspect of things playing out, which it's like Mount Carmel, Palestine, Texas is right
Mhm.
next to it. There's so
David's
much of
Koresh
this
name
doomsday
itself
prophecy.
was his name itself was like from King David and
Yeah.
what
That's what I mean.
wasn't like Koresh like some sort of translation of like Titus or something, which was like an
Oh
ancient
man,
like the
Cyrus or
it's so
original
something.
like
crazy.
good goy or something, I think.
Oh
Yeah.
dude,
Yeah, it's
it's
crazy.
nuts.
Because people
So
don't realize Koresh, that's not even his real name. I'm
No.
sure some people know that. But like,
Exactly.
what was his name?
Yeah.
Something Vincent or something?
Biblical Cyrus, by the way, but no, it was Vernon
Vernon.
Vernon Howell, right?
Vernon
Yeah, yeah,
Howell.
yeah.
It sounds
Uh-huh.
like a cult leader. That name sounds like a
Oh
cult
yeah,
leader. He could have
absolutely.
stuck with it.
And no, it's so crazy to me because it was Vernon Wayne Howell. It was his original
Yeah.
name, and of course the whole situation. If you study kind of many of these, and I won't take it all the way to this kind of conclusion yet. And even in this sort of context, I don't think we have enough time to even provide enough detail to kind of get to this very strange alternative theory that could have played out. But you study a lot of these. a lot of these patsies, right,
Mhm.
who are essentially kind of manufactured personalities placed onto this very strange path of the patsy, and they share all the same hallmarks, and your pattern recognition is just, you know,
Yeah.
going off,
Right.
right? And you just witness they're visiting all these Iron Curtain countries, and at the height of the Soviet, the Cold War, and almost the same exact thing as a John David Chapman or a Mark David Chapman, I mean, or a Lee Harvey Oswald, obviously, or
Mhm.
Koresh made the
you know,
trip, didn't he? Isn't that what you're getting at?
Koresh made the
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah, he kissed the
And you
wall,
can call
doggy.
it a pilgrimage, but hey,
That's how we
what
got
are
the new
talking
name.
about here?
That's how we got the new
You know?
name. That's crazy. But he did, right? He went over to Israel, I believe, came back,
Absolutely.
and did he change his
Yeah.
name afterwards?
He
Or
changed his name.
change his name
Yeah,
afterwards?
he
He
was
consulted the
given
council.
he was
So you're
given
telling me
he
Mossad did
he was
Waco?
shown the
Is that what
sacred
Jose is saying?
knowledge, Yeah. It feels like he was introduced to the sacred knowledge, the vanguards, potentially the vanguards and the caretakers of the true history, allegedly revealed to him,
Did
all that, right, that he could then utilize for his own, which apparently you listen to the actual members of the group, didn't really possess this charismatic ability until he returned, which that alone
that's
could be just
interesting.
a part of some sort of way to reinforce this larger than life caricature of
Hmm.
David Koresh. But you listen to how he would convince people about, the seven seals of Revelation, and which is really what he was attempting to present allegedly to these groups, where internationally you had all walks of the theological doctrine as well would be present and represented at Mount Carmel just to study his teachings. And
Really?
that alone really kind of caused me, just at least it gave me pause,
Huh.
especially considering all the special forces that were present during the final catastrophic, outcome.
Who were the
Uh,
people?
uh,
Do you know who the people were visiting? Like, were they, fringe sects of certain religions, or were they like,
oh no, they were legitimate authorities. Yeah, biblical scholars, theological experts, priests, rabbis from all around the world had even been flying into Waco as far as just to study the teachings of the seven seals, and that was all after David Koresh and Steve Schneider had been traveling the world to talk to these various religious leaders,
hmm,
who then flocked to Mount Carmel. So allegedly, yeah, but it's biblical scholars and rabbis and members of,
that's
apparently
interesting.
they came to this seminary school. They said that, for example, this is an insane story, that apparently David Koresh came to their seminary school, these individuals, or their synagogue, right? And then he would essentially sit down with them with the Bible and teach them more about the scripture within an hour than they had learned in the past 2 or 3 years at their school or houses of study and worship. This was what they would
Do you
consistently
think?
claim.
Do you think he's hiding the polygamy aspect? Because I feel like certain theologians would come by and be like, I mean, he's saying things that are interesting, but he's living a certain like super hypocritical life that goes against it. I wonder what they're if they even saw it.
I mean, I'm no biblical scholar, but I mean, polygamy is pretty common in a lot of different sects, and it is in the Bible. So,
I mean,
I'm not even Christian particularly. So,
I don't
I
think
do
it's
think there's a religious angle people can take for it,
yeah,
probably.
it's in the Old Testament for sure. I don't think the New Testament
He
the New
convinced
Testament
them.
forbids it.
Is he convinced them that this form of polygamy, specifically that they practiced within the Branch Davidians, was that it wasn't, of course, the goal was not about having sex. That, yeah, that
So
he
now you sound
always
like
had a
Elon Musk.
goal.
Oh boy.
Exactly. A focus, and that was to have children. So yes, it
Right.
was about insemination.
Okay.
And so he wanted to have as many kids as possible. Now, hey, man, you guys stick with me. I know we don't have enough time to create the conceptual alternative theory, but imagine. I'm talking about Nazi breeding experiments for MK Ultra purposes,
Mm-hmm.
Manchurian candidates. Like, we have legitimate evidence that you can tie to certain things of that nature, which wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility. As much as anyone who's aware of Waco, please don't take that like consideration, and of course, as some sort of offense to the victims. Like, in no way. I think we should just
Keep it
remain
in mind.
open-minded
Yeah.
to, yeah, to a more of a
Right.
more of a plausible explanation to what could potentially have been taking place in regard to this scandal and how it effectively played out.
It's
But-
not uncommon for the powers to be that hide in the absurd. I'm not saying
sure.
I don't think. I mean, I think you probably agree, Austin. I don't know. Me and you probably don't think I've dug enough into Waco to come to some of the solid conclusions, some of the more wackier stuff. But there's definitely credence to it, and and
Absolutely.
from our studying and many of the other things out there in the world, in this realm of thinking and how wacky some of them can get. And it's almost like they do try often, in fact, to hide in the absurd. So you do kind of have to be prepared for maybe this is complete inverse of what you think in a lot of these different situations.
Well,
What if there were demographics that were being specifically targeted due to their, the profile that they fit specifically as
Oh,
test
wow.
subjects
Right.
for some sort of covert operation to sophisticate techniques that you could utilize on the public in mass in many ways.
Yep.
If you were to, yeah, I mean, again, it's just. It's something you have to inevitably grapple with when you are down these proverbial rabbit
It's like how
holes of
Charles Manson
investigation.
was an experiment. That whole thing
Exactly.
was created
Exactly.
by the government, and Helter Skelter was that's like a government accelerationist idea, I believe. I don't think that's really what Charles came up with. So then, what were we gonna say?
Well, I was just laughing. I think you're 100% right. Yeah,
that's like a
absolutely, I agree.
2-hour thing right there. That's
Yeah.
that's Scientology. It all comes back down to Scientology, in my opinion.
Oh,
and
nice.
That's quite the wormhole to make.
Oh,
I don't know
man.
if you've had Dana Duda on, but that
No.
comes all back to the process. Scientology,
Interesting.
Charles Manson. It goes way deeper than I think Tom O'Neill.
I
went with
forget.
it, so.
I think it was. I don't know if. So I just did Danny Jones' show. I don't think he said this to me on camera, but it was something we were talking about later on. I don't know. I didn't look it up, so I'm just gonna say I believed him, but I don't know if it's true. He said a lot of the remote viewers in the CIA were Scientologists. I don't know if you guys heard that. I immediately was just like, nah, sounds about right. And I was like, I gotta look that up. But I'm like, yeah, something's there. There's a lot of weird connections with Scientology and the government.